Once a year, the sky over Chantilly bursts into color. It's the town's annual fireworks festival, the Nuit de Feu. The Nuit de Feu is an explosive way to see this French village at night, and a day at Chantilly promises plenty of ways to spark your interest too. Say the name Chantilly to a French person and three things come to mind. Its castle, its 19,000 acres of forest, and its horses. In the midst of daybreak, the trails in this forest are like the Autobahn. Masses of thoroughbreds run full speed through the trees, training for the races. Two of the world's most prestigious horse races are held in Chantilly every June, the Prix Diane Hermès and the Prix du Jockey Club. Chantilly is 40 kilometers as the eagle flies north of Paris, in the French region of Picardy. As the sun rises over the town, its residents are beginning to wake up and start their day. Every morning, the horses living in Chantilly's magnificent stables patiently submit themselves to a beauty regime worthy of a spa. The ponçage, as it's known in French, isn't just your typical rub-down. It's a whole series of invigorating treatments, complete with motorized tools. One by one, the animals file in to be sprayed, vacuumed, and wiped. It takes about 20 minutes to get a horse really clean. There's even a special ultraviolet sunbed for the horses to dry off, though they tend to prefer sunbathing under the real thing. Chantilly's horses have the most palatial living quarters in town. The stables were built for a prince in the 1700s and held over 200 horses, 3 packs of hunting dogs, and a staff of 89. Yves Bien-Aimé is the head of the Chantilly stables. Bien-Aimé is an avid horseman and an institution in this town. In 1982, he revived the nearly abandoned stables and then threw them open to the public by turning the site into the Living Horse Museum. Bien-Aimé is rehearsing for the equestrian show that will precede the fireworks this evening. Based on his personality, each horse has its own role in the museum, and each one performs differently.
Some horses have personalities just like people. In a ballet company, there's the star and there's the corps de ballet. It's the same here. I've created 120 different numbers. I love to do it. Sometimes I'm inspired by a horse and create a number just for it. And often the number disappears when the horse disappears.
The Living Horse Museum is appropriately named. It breathes with life. The first Sunday of every month, the museum offers the public a live equestrian show, which is both classical and contemporary, mixing Baroque and ballet, flamenco, and even a bit of disco. The building itself is purely classical.
The 7th Prince of Condé, Louis-Henri de Bourbon, had these stables built to look like a palace because he believed he would be reincarnated as a horse. And the great stables were more beautiful than the castle. When the princes received the kings in the 18th century, they didn't receive them in the castle but in the stables. There were huge parties here, and we still throw big parties for people from all over the world.
The museum shows the horse in all its variety and history. 31 different rooms exhibit antique carousel figures. The evolution of how jockeys used to ride. The horse in art, folklore, design, and mythology, equestrian anatomy, and a whole pharmacy of horse medication. The museum is educational, too. 3 times a day, an instructor demonstrates how a rider trains and communicates with his horse. But the main attractions in this living horse museum are the living horses.
I buy horses when they make me think of paintings. I'm passionate about equestrian art. I'm passionate about all art. I bought the most expensive horse of my life in just 1 minute because it reminded me of a painting by Velázquez. You're in a spiritual place, and spirituality is like art. It's the quest for beauty. I want this place to make people dream. An Englishman came to me after one of my shows and said, "Your show isn't like any other I've seen. It's Parisian, it's gay, and it's poetic."
The morning sun heats the cobblestones of the stable courtyard, while poetry of a more aggressive nature is taking place. Mario Lurowski and his troupe of stuntmen are also performing this evening. In the world of French cinema, Lurowski is famous as a stuntman and horse trainer. His horses are movie stars. Like any movie stars, they have to be handled with care.
For all risky professions, you need luck and a lot of feeling. If you're missing one of these, you won't last long. I've been doing this job nearly 30 years. I started young, and touch wood, until now, I haven't really had any serious fractures. I guess that means I've had a certain amount of feeling, a good dose of luck, and a lot of technique. It's the horse that chooses this job. The more arrogant and dynamic he is, and the stronger his personality, the better he'll be for this kind of work. We test a horse for about 3 or 4 months. We then know if he's going to work out or not. But only 1 horse out of 20 makes a good stunt horse. The first time I ever fell off a horse wasn't for the movies at all. It's because the horse threw me off.
As the horses thunder along the ground, the spirit of Jules Verne rises into the sky overhead. The Aérophile of Chantilly is the world's largest helium balloon, as tall as a 10-story building. It can take nearly 40 passengers 150 meters straight up into the air. From there, you can see not only the chateau and its gardens, but the surrounding forest, villages, and cathedrals. It's the brainchild of Jérôme Giacomoni and Mathieu Gobi, 2 friends who were born on the same day, went to the same schools, and had the same crazy business idea.
Our idea is actually quite old. A Frenchman named Henri Giffard had the same idea in 1867. He launched a balloon which was attached to the ground, just like ours, except that he used hydrogen. Instead of a cable, he used rope, and instead of an electric winch, his was steam. But the principle was the same. Only the French made these balloons, but there were lots of them all over the world. The first were in Paris, then London. The most famous was in the Tuileries Gardens in 1878. It took 35,000 passengers 500 meters up into the air. It was 5 times as big as ours, and there was never the slightest accident. There were others in Cairo and Chicago, all over the place, but their purpose was different from ours. It was the era of universal expositions. The goal of these balloons was to show the expositions from above. Our goal is to show the national heritage. Our attraction could only work in historic sites because they were designed to be beautiful.
The 2 entrepreneurs had a hard time getting their business off the ground. They were ready to let it drop after 20 banks turned them down, but then the 21st said yes, luckily, because their balloon has proved a success. The balloon gently descends into its historical setting. A few meters away sits a group of 18th century cottages in a garden called the hameau. At the hameau, Waiters in traditional costumes are serving lunch. Two of the Hameau's regular clients are Isabelle Pliassoff and Pascal Douche, who run cultural tours of the area. The Hameau is only 10 minutes from the castle, but they say that for the court nobles it used to be an adventure, a little like going slumming in the country.
It was a time when the people were very uptight in their clothing. For example, under their ties, they had pieces of cardboard or even wood. They really weren't comfortable, and they weren't used to going outside, except for professional reasons, like the military or politics. And then suddenly they discovered a chance to relax. It's like today. We might work in the city and have a second house in the country where we spend weekends. But the biggest difference is that we only dream of doing something. They actually built something. And when the style changed, they tore down what they had built and made something else. The only real difference between them and us is money.
They built a whole village in the Hameau, and they came here just to spend some time outside. You'd have noble ladies and gentlemen all dressed up, coming to see the farm, the animals, the canal, etc. They'd leave the castle to come and get some air in the park. Or they'd come here just before going to a party in the castle.
Head to the castle after lunch to see how much life has changed here since France started beheading its royalty. Its last private owner was the Duke of Aumale, who was forced into exile in the 1800s. The Duke moved to England, where he amassed an impressive collection of art and books. When he returned to Chantilly, his castle was in ruins thanks to the Revolution, so he rebuilt it into a museum worthy of his art. It's known as the Condé Museum and contains France's most important private collection of paintings. The museum guides are sure to point out 3 masterpieces by Raphael.
We're in front of the Virgin of Lorette by Raphael. The Duke of Aumale bought this painting thinking it was a good copy. And then about 10 years ago, during a restoration, we realized it's actually the original. There were 2 important giveaways. The first is the catalog number from the original collection, this number, 133, on the bottom left. The other clue showed up during the radiography for the restoration. Behind Joseph is hidden the painting of a countryside. So we knew we had the original Raphael here at Chantilly.
The paintings are closely scattered all over the walls, the exact way the Duke hung them. This was the typical 19th century style. Ignoring chronology or importance, he put his favorites at eye level and the others higher up. Alongside the paintings, there are priceless objects such as the pink diamond, which took an unexpected trip in 1926.
This here is a copy of the pink diamond. The original is still at Chantilly because nothing in our collection is allowed to leave. The original diamond was stolen back in 1926 by 2 Alsatians. One evening, during a storm, they managed to climb over the walls and get into the castle. But by a stroke of luck, the diamond was later found in a hotel room, in an apple. The thieves had went away for several days when a cleaning lady came into their room. She saw the apple, bit into it, and she found the diamond.
The living quarters are in the original part of the chateau, which survived the revolutionary frenzy. On the walls of the Salon des Singes, monkeys replaced men in scenes of war, hunting, alchemy, and architecture. The room reflects a 19th century fad, when the French nobility decided the Orient was all the rage. The Duke of Aumale spent a lot of time in his library. His collection of books is still one of France's most important. It includes 70,000 volumes and nearly 1,000 precious manuscripts. The castle has been built and rebuilt 4 times in the past 400 years, and remnants from each century still exist. It has its ghosts, like Vatel, the Prince de Condé's chief party organizer. One time, the prince invited 5,000 guests to the castle, including King Louis XIV. Vatel was mortified when 3 meat dishes were missing from the dinner table, but things only got worse the next day when the fish delivery failed to arrive in time. In utter despair, Vatel stabbed himself to death. In the afternoon, stroll through the gardens, just like the Prince de Condé used to do in the 1600s. Of course, it might be a different kind of stroll. The prince often trailed a group of secretaries behind him. Whenever he was inspired by a design idea for his grounds, he would announce it, and the secretaries would furiously note his every word. Later, the famous landscape architect Le Nôtre saw to it that the prince had the garden of his dreams. Alain Vandeville works on the castle grounds.
Le prince était très fier de son jardin et le montrait.
The prince was very proud of his garden and he liked to show it off, especially right before parties. When his guests went inside, his gardeners got to work changing the plants and the flowers. They even changed the colors. You might go in and the garden would be blue, and when you'd come out it was pink. And when they didn't have enough flowers in the right color, the gardeners used porcelain flowers to fill in the gaps left in the back of the garden.
Pour justement boucher les trous lorsqu'on n'avait pas assez de fleurs de la couleur désirée.
Across the moat from the castle, a field of fireworks looks deceptively benign. As showtime approaches, Frédéric Vergne takes a last walk through the field. Vergne is the originator and artistic director of the Nuit de Feu. He also happens to be the castle's librarian, and it was while looking through old accounts that he stumbled on the history of fireworks at Chantilly.
I was looking through some records from the 17th and 18th centuries when I discovered repeated references to fireworks. For example, in 1672, the Prince de Condé, Louis II of Bourbon, received the king's son here. And he said that during that event, day followed night. So we also decided to make day follow night. And that's how the Nuit de Feu was born.
17th century technology meant the fireworks were simple, white or gold. Tonight there are 6 nations in the festival. Each country uses lots of colors, but has its own particular style.
Their styles are different according to their cultures. In each country, fireworks have developed in different ways. The Japanese use essentially big, beautiful bombs which are perfectly round. The French have very colorful fireworks with the famous French bouquet. The English like candles and bombs. The Italians use brilliantly colored bombs. The colors are almost aggressive. The US is a mix of cultures, so you have a little of Japan, a little of England, and a zest of France. And the Chinese use something called compacts, which is like a bunch of small, multicolored fireworks which fly out in every direction.
For Vergne, fireworks are poetry.
I'm passionate about fireworks because I think it's a means of expression which is artistic in the medieval sense of the word. It's the closest thing to the human spirit and the most creative because the effects are infinite. A projector will always be a projector and a laser. But a firework is a mixture of primary elements with a zest of doubt because you never know what will happen. And a good amount of stress because you can't rehearse. Ultimately, it's the closest thing to profound human joy.
In the village of Chantilly, the crowds are beginning to arrive for the show. Chantilly's fireworks festival attracts nearly 100,000 visitors. They come from all over France and from farther away. Before the show, there's plenty of action on the grounds. Sketches, props, food, and activities for the kids. Every year, the festival has a different theme. And sometimes unexpected guests make flashy appearances.
He's a little anxious right now because he has a few psychological problems. In my opinion, he's on the trail of something. We'll see where it leads. I have a feeling it's by the bar. Let's go see.
Or help you that the autumn men were cold as girls grow old, and we all lose our charm.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
But Chantilly is used to appearances by famous people, from Louis XIV to Richard Nixon, who visited during his term as U.S. president. He was so impressed, he asked, "Why have I been taken to Versailles 7 times and never here?" 007 spent some time at the castle too, when it was used as the location for the James Bond thriller A View to a Kill. As evening starts to fall, people take their places on the grass of the Hippodrome. Normally, this is the track used for Chantilly's renowned horse races. The show starts out with a mythical figure, Pegasus, ridden by Yves Bien-Aimé's daughter, Sophie. Afterwards, Mario Luraski and his stuntmen dash in. The show is a surprising contrast of the old with the new, a historical setting as a backdrop to a slew of ultra-modern techniques and effects. And at last, a symphony of fireworks light up the sky over Chantilly, just like they did 300 years ago.